KingofPodcasts.com proudly presents The Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Brought to you by KingofAmazon.com. KOP is all about Amazon, and so should you. Go to King of Podcasts' special link at KingofAmazon.com. Welcome to episode 574 of the Wrestling is Real podcast. Thanks for being here. A special look in depth into unionization, influencer marketing, and the WWE. Because there's so much to be talked about tonight, which really sparked a firestorm this weekend over the firing of Zelina Vega. Now, you already knew about the story. For those of you, I'll give you a little bit back up to speed, but we're going to go through the history of unionization leading up to today. But what I also want to do is I want to take it outside of what the normal wrestling media will talk about when it comes to unionization and the understanding of what the Screen Actors Guild / American Federation of Television and Radio Artists are now combined together in recent years as SAG-AFTRA, which is one of the largest Hollywood labor unions, one of the largest labor unions for talent in the world. I believe it's 160,000 members strong in this particular organization. In my Broadcasters podcast, as a reference, you can go ahead and take a look for yourself at all the information I've talked about when it comes to labor unions, which since April 2018 have been going through a lot of labor disputes. When it comes to the screenwriters, when it comes to producers, directors, all the people involved within Hollywood, because they're all working off of unions. And in their point right now, they're in a major labor dispute. I don't know if anybody's going to talk about that when this comes to this. But unions and the talk of unionization have been going on for a long time. And of course, we're going to talk about 1986 and Jesse Ventura's attempt for that, among other things. And really, it's amazing how WWE at this whole time where Vince McMahon has been in charge, how he's been able to go ahead and kind of sway away from this subject, because it's been discussed many times. It's obviously having proper workers' rights, workers' pay, workers' compensation, workers' benefits. This is what we're all talking about. And so what's happening here is it goes back to several months ago when we started seeing a compromising of those who have social media accounts, namely Twitch, and I forget if it was, there was also the supposed thought of OnlyFans. So there's multiple, there are talent, there are either reality stars or people that are influencers online that have made their way to other sites to go ahead and continue to promote themselves, whether they're not promoting their brand in per se. It's the same way where I'm doing this program. Why am I a full-time employer? But I still get to do this programming with the best of him, with their blessing, that I'm able to go and do other content. That really does not, the content is not like I'm using anything of their name or likeness on this show. I put my own name, King of Podcasts, as the branding throughout, which I do not use at all in my full-time employment. But I keep those church and state. So the same thing happens here with WWE, where they want to keep things church and state. They want to be able to control all of their product, down to the characters, the likenesses, and their dimensions of character, their complex narrative. It's almost like trying to keep the last moments of kayfabe alive. But then again, you could also reestablish kayfabe by doing this, but for whatever reason, the company doesn't want to do that. There's so much to read about it. So much to go and bring up. We're going to get into it right now. So I got a lot of things to go into it. And first of all, let's go right into the real meat of the matter. What already happened so far that caused the real rift, that really got everything going. And there's a number of stories that have talked about Zelina Vega and her being let go. So I want to take from the industry side, and I want to take it from the sports side. Take it outside of the wrestling realm, because all due respect to my wrestling brethren, I've worked in media for 25 years plus. And I've entrenched myself doing a Broadcasters podcast. That's the name of the show, broadcasterspodcast.com. I talk about this on a regular basis. So I've taken enough time and research and read through and wherewithal knowledge of the subject, and I've done enough interviews out there with people to get a good grasp of what's going on here with this story. So this is definitely into my normal media wheel well. So I'm gonna be putting both hats on. But again, I want to keep it so that the wrestling audience here will have a good understanding of what's going on, and you'll have a good understanding of where things are underlying right now. So let's get into that. So first of all, Zelina Vega's firing over her Twitch is turning WWE contracts into a national labor issue. Let's go into the actual story that happens and talk about what actually happened here. This goes back to this past Sunday, or actually this past Monday. So although Zelina Vega tweeted her support for unionization, WWE is claiming that she was fired because she breached her contract when she launched a non-nude OnlyFans account. Sports Illustrated citing company sources saying Vega, real name Thea Trinidad, boxed them into a corner when she opened up an OnlyFans account. The decision became after discussions regarding Twitch. As previously noted, WWE has told their talent that they were not to engage with third parties like Twitch and Cameo, that was the other one, and could be subject to fines, suspensions, or they could be fired. The belief is that WWE is looking to establish their own presence on Twitch, and wrestlers would deal with WWE instead of generating their own revenue on the platform. WWE recently established a service similar to Cameo where they charge fans to speak with wrestlers on group video calls. Vega's firing has led to the president of SAG-AFTRA reaching out, and there appears to be some interest in having wrestlers join their union. A former presidential candidate, Andrew Yang, stated that he plans on pushing for the rights of wrestlers, since they are treated as employees in some ways but are classified as independent contractors. Her firing raises questions about her husband, Aleister Black's future with the company. So there is more news from WrestlingNews.co, where I'm getting the story from. They've heard that others in the company that support unionization, but they saw what happened with Vega and realized a message was sent when she was fired. And there's optimism among others that SAG-AFTRA's interest in Yang's statements, but the feeling among many in the company is that some of the top names who are making over $1 million a year are not going to speak up. And while AEW is not an option for some, there's a realization that they can't sign everyone from WWE, and AEW's roster is already overcrowded, so speaking up right now in favor of unionizing is not seen as a viable option. Now, this is something where I think about, I absolutely can understand where there are certain stars that might get intertwined because they might be getting into some projects where they're on television or in movies. So you're going to have your SAG-AFTRA card. So say a Sasha Banks working on The Mandalorian, or The Miz and Maurice working on Miz and Mrs., or, The Rock in his early time, but not until he, basically has kind of left wrestling for more of a permanent basis. John Cena, they all have SAG-AFTRA cards. They are all part of the Actors Union, as far as I know. And so they're going to bring this in, and there's already a familiarity with some of those wrestlers to do that. But the thing is, the question really is about SAG-AFTRA wanting to go ahead and unionize these stars. Because what's happening is it looks like they're trying to do this with influencers, trying to unionize all together. The question is, why is it that we have SAG-AFTRA getting involved right now and wanted to? Why would Gabrielle Carteris, who used to be one of the most featured members, one of the featured cast members on Beverly Hills 90210, you remember she was the nerdy one with the glasses, right? Well, the question is, why is this happening now? Why is the opportunity? Why is it that SAG-AFTRA is so opportunistic right now of jumping in? Well, there's going to be some stories that could be brought into this. And part of it is because they are looking for new bodies to come in and solidify their base, mobilize more people to be involved in negotiating with studios and with other projects. So a month ago, there was a story about influencers are being taken advantage of. The social media stars are turning to unions. From theguardian.com, the fact is that these WWE superstars, a number of them, are in their own way influencers. They're worth billions of dollars. and WWE knows as well, outside of their normal universe, they're also worth a lot of money everywhere else because they're talented. In some cases, they can modify themselves into other things. Because remember, this is sports entertainment. So these stars could be, as we've already seen, a place for recruitment for new talent. And we've seen many people come for this route. And the current route, what was it? We had Becky Lynch at that time, Dave Bautista, John Cena, The Rock, Wade Barrett. I mean, you could think Edge, right? There's a lot of people that have been brought on that have been considered for work. And they're all looking at themselves and saying, man, there's a chance to get and be involved. So anyway, this Guardian story talks about how one of the stars of Love Island, one of the biggest reality shows in the UK, talked about encouraging Twitter followers to join a union. Saying on a Twitter post, in a 14-second video, we're in a really uncertain time when it comes to work and your rights and legislation. If I can give you one piece of advice, join a union. They were my absolute saving grace when I was employed by a big company. This is what we're talking about. At age 18, she joined Unite, the UK's second largest trade union. And the reality star says the union gave her the strength to stand up to bosses who would, quote, try to get you to do stuff you're not supposed to do. Just over 6.4 million in the UK are trade union members, down from 13 million in the 70s. But Hart believes unions are more important than ever. She meant, as an influencer, her job is too niche for unionization. And that's the point. And now we have, in the UK as well, the Creator Union, the first union for digital content creators. And a group in America, the American Influencer Council, was launched in the U.S. So we're starting to see this across the board. By definition, influencers are popular people with the power to affect what others buy, think, and feel. While this power can be harnessed negatively, nearly every member of the Kardashians have been criticized for promoting harmful deities. It can also be used for good. But either which way, the influencer community worldwide is expected to be worth $15 billion, 15 billion euros, or put that more to about 16 or $17 billion worldwide by 2022, can and does exploit workers, according to the story. An example. A technology reporter in America, Taylor Lorenz, revealed that the talent management agency Speaker owed influencers thousands in unpaid fees. The influencers Lorenz interviewed had posted ad campaigns orchestrated by Speaker, which included Ford, Disney, Microsoft, and Sony, but their invoices remained unpaid for months. And then a 22-year-old influencer owed $4,000 by Speaker, not Spreaker, SPEAKR, took the company to a small claims court, and a judge ruled in its favor. So now, that's the idea. So instead of having it go through a new organization with no clout, SAG-AFTRA is saying to themselves, you know what? We are a big enough organization to take on and support our fellow brothers in arms, in talent, in WWE. That's the point. That's what they're trying to get at here. So they can try that. And that's why we have stories now like we had with Zelina Vega. National labor issue. National labor issue. SB Nation writes about this. Right now, in the report, Vega says she doesn't know what she's going to do from here. There is interest from her largest competitors, AEW and Impact Wrestling, but right now she's concentrating on her Twitch channel until we hear more. So again, firing Vega has become the latest flashpoint in an incendiary back and forth of wrestler rights inside WWE and beyond. Let's go into what the story was actually about. During an appearance on Steve Austin's podcast in 2016, this is from TheWrap.com, Jesse Ventura said he attempted to convince his WWF co-stars to unionize in 1986, only to find himself almost fired by Vince McMahon within hours. Years later, Ventura said during his ultimately successful unpaid royalties lawsuit against the organization, that he'd been snitched on by Hulk Hogan. Let's go back to 2012 to a Bleacher Report study to get more into the in-depth details about the Jesse Ventura thing. So there were three things they said in this article, and Steven Sonneveld why WWE and pro wrestlers should form a professional wrestling union. He wrote this after or during WrestleMania 28. And by the way, all the links to all the articles I'm talking about in tonight's program, you can find it at wrestlingisreal.com. Wrestlingisreal.com. You'll find it where you'll see the Spreaker embed player, and you can go right there and go and look at all the links for yourself. Now, the 3 reasons you want to go ahead and have a union is, if you want to be a wrestler, you have to be prepared to live in a day of your pain. If you want to be a wrestler, you need to make sure you have something to fall back on when it ends. If you want to be a wrestler, you have to remember it's not just what you earn, it's what you save. In Jesse Ventura's book, I Ain't Got Time to Bleed, he wrote this passage, quote, all through your wrestling career, remember you're an independent contractor. You're paying out enormous amounts in taxes. There's no pension, no health benefits. And the moment you're not making that draw, the promoters couldn't care less about you. You're a piece of meat. I knew guys that worked hard for 20 years or more and still retire with nothing. Wrestling operated under some of the most unfair working conditions in the country. I don't know how they got away with it for so many years. And that passage lives true today. So we could go into the whole story about classification of an independent contractor. Got that. But we're moving along. Going in more into the history of the possible unionization or the issues of being an independent contractor. Wrestlers like Raven, Canyon, and Mike Sanders filed a lawsuit against the company over this classification. In 2009, a federal judge dismissed the case because the statute of limitations has expired and no legal questions regarding independent contractor status were resolved. In a standard WWE contract, it states that the wrestler has to provide all costs for their costumes, props, etc., but has no claim to the intellectual property. When speaking with Howard Stern in 2010, Jesse Ventura was asked, how are they self-employed when you're signed exclusively? You can't work for nobody else. They tell you when where you'll work. They can totally control your life. And yet they call you an independent contractor. How has their government allowed them to get away with that for 35 to 40 years? The end result is the same. It's the American worker who pays. It's the American worker who suffers. It's the American worker who needs to be stopped taking advantage of. Bret Hart told Eric Cohen in a 2007 interview, I'm a big advocate for a union in wrestling. I don't think their wrestlers will get any type of support until they get a union. I look at every other sport, whether it's lacrosse or even the rodeo, they all got a union. I think it is long, long overdue that the wrestlers have one. I think that any wrestler that says they don't need a union is just a sheep that doesn't have enough brains to know that they do need a union. This story has more about what Jesse Ventura did to try to help the matter. There was a lot being said. Only a very small percentage of professional wrestlers are the ones earning a 6-figure or more WWE salary and are able to participate in the company's pro talent programs, such as regular seminars to help wrestlers pick appropriate health insurance plans and manage their finances, or having the company pay for treatment of injuries that they sustained in the ring. Now, back in 2012, they did bring up the story about how, or 2011, they did talk about the reunions and being brought up. So in spite of the patchwork of the nature of the wrestling world, multiple production companies in film and TV don't deter strong unions and wouldn't pose a hurdle to collective bargaining in the wrestling industry. At the time, the Screen Actors Guild told Bleacher Report that, quote, a key benefit of a labor union is the unique opportunity for freelance workforce to earn a pension and qualify for health insurance coverage. Particularly one spot may be attractive in the short term, but the physical toll of the wrestling business is immediately felt and carries long-term repercussions. It's also funny how about some of the people that are back at work again and that might have been working in any major promotion were talking a lot about this. But now we do have the issue where we don't have as many people that are wrestling in house shows and doing that grueling schedule right now. It's mostly television. It also goes back to when, before the WWE became what it is today, there was a loose confederation of territories when the first growing of the wrestling business, the National Wrestling Alliance. The first chapter of Sean Asayel and Mike Mooneyham's Sex, Lies, and Headlocks paints a scene when 6 territory bosses gathered in an Iowa hotel to form the NWA in the summer of 1948. Quote, they all had problems keeping talent and avoiding bidding wars. Perhaps they should consider formalizing their ties. Surely they can see the money that could be made if they agreed to share their headliners, unite around a single champion, fix the wage scales, and blacklist any wrestler who have refused to toe the line. Of course, what it sounded like, it sounded an awful lot like the violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. Then they talked about Lou Thez, who always had one step ahead of the cabal. Quote, he knew that one of the best ways to keep from being cheated was to make friends with athletic commissioners in the towns he played, since they were the only ones who would give him straight answers about the number of tickets that had been sold. Thanks to those relationships, he frequently got 10% of the take for each show he worked. This story is very comprehensive. They go through so much in this article I don't want to take time to go and get into. But many people have talked about this. The New York Times has had a lot to be said. CTE's also brought in this story as well. They bring up Chris Benoit, Christopher Nowitzki, so many others. So if you want a full, comprehensive look at that, take a look at that article. We'll look at that. So what's the reason why we're getting to this point? Why is there the thought process we need to go ahead and have this happening? We don't know. Now, one of the things we know about Zelina Vega, it doesn't look like she's going to stay out of wrestling for long. There is some expressing of interest to come back into another wrestling company. She went on Twitch after the release of her from WWE, which actually happened on November 12th. On November 13th, she says she's not angry, she's just thankful. She said also in the same video, quote, my first love is wrestling, and I'm not going to give that up. She also encouraged her fans to not be afraid to stand up for themselves. She didn't represent the company, and it wouldn't be smart to do so. She's under a 90-day non-compete. Now, we mentioned Gabrielle Carteris. She's the one that actually brought on a lot of this going on. The real notice, because we always get this kind of conversation, you know, when this thing kind of happens with independent contractors. It's almost like a regular yearly discussion. Not on this program, but many other people do that. Well, but what really got people interested was the fact that Gabrielle Carteris, Beverly Hills 90210 actress and president of the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, reached out to Zelina Vega personally. Again, SAG-AFTRA is a labor union that employs or represents over 160,000 people in the entertainment industry. That includes journalists, radio personalities, TV actors, recording artists, singers, and voice actors. This can also affect mixed martial arts, the likes of UFC or Bellator. So Gabrielle actually tweeted to Zelina Vega and said, quote, thanks for standing strong for labor solidarity. I support you, and sent her email. And then SAG-AFTRA also did the same thing, because Zelina put out, I support unionization. Just like that. I'm not going to talk about what everybody's talking about and how their thoughts are, because I just want to point out the whole story here and let it be understood. This story was actually getting some traction after the Cameo Twitch scandal that came out before, and Vince McMahon, in a story from Fansided, talked about how unionization could be on the horizon because of the handling of the situation. This is a bad situation for the company. After coming from the pandemic and dealing with the issues with house shows, trying to keep their own financial health in order, which they've done successfully, now might be the biggest problem of their pandemic, where unionization will have come into play. And the pandemic, it's a culprit. It's a factor, because the lack of house shows, the lack of appearances, the lack of merchandise. Everybody's gone online to do something extra to kind of continue to build what they're doing. And so that's why Zelina Vega did what she did, among like other stars like AJ Styles, or, you know, this is the thing. WWE, yes, they do have a prominent social media footprint across everywhere. What is it, like 6 billion impressions, I think it is? That's big. They got a major YouTube following, major on Instagram, major on Twitter, Facebook. You have it. They do. But then you also have the stars now that have made them way onto other social media channels, and they pushed the envelope as to what they're able to do. But the two platforms they had a problem with, WWE, was Cameo and Twitch, because they were using their personal likeness to be on the air. Twitch, it's also where they'll allow appearances on radio shows and they'll allow appearances on other things. But to have somebody be autonomous to their own channel to be live was a problem. And there are some stars that have gotten away with it. And, like an AJ Styles can have a Twitch channel and he's not being affected by it. But again, he's also playing along the line. He's making good money and he is just basically doing gaming as a result. Paige is also someone that's on Twitch that's also got quite a bit of a following as well. And these are the things that we're dealing with right now. It's the Zelina Vega, the threat of termination was put out. It only took 2 months for it to actually be instituted. Now, we remember that back in September, WrestlingInc.com reported that Vince McMahon had unilaterally decreed that WWE superstars were no longer allowed to, quote, engage with outside third parties. Exactly which outside third parties Vince has an issue with were not explicitly identified, but it was at least we knew Cameo and Twitch, and that YouTube channels like Xavier Woods' gaming channel Up, Down, Down could be in jeopardy. The initial reporting also specified a call with talent, including the assertion that WWE, quote, owns the real names of talent, not just their character names. While reporting on Fightful Select, they later pushed back on that, saying that multiple wrestlers have contacted them to state that Vince McMahon does not own their real names. That letter that sent the talent was name and likeness. So they, in an official statement by the company about this, they were talking about the fact that they are expressing, quote, control and exploitation of these characters being a primary revenue source. So the company's not able to monetize off of it, so why should you? The statement also mentioned that it's imperative for the success of our company to protect our greatest assets and establish partnerships with third parties on a company-wide basis, rather than at the individual level, which as a result will provide more value for all involved. Well, that's bullshit. Not everybody's going to be involved with every channel, and, certain platforms are not going to want to accommodate the entire company. You're only going to be a set amount of stars that are going to do really well on platforms. So the issue doesn't seem to be with streaming games or filming shout-outs to fans, but how much control they can exert over it and how much of the money made for those avenues comes to them. By moving this content under their umbrella, rather than it being something the talent are doing on their own, the company can make the majority of the money while controlling both the content itself and how much of that profit reaches the talents. Which is, again, where we know this is coming from. So, point ourselves all the way forward, here we are. This is the problem. Why would SAG-AFTRA want to go ahead and be a part of this? That's the other thing we want to find out. That's the one thing, because right now, SAG-AFTRA, I think, they want to mobilize, they want to fortify their forces. And if they're having issues unionizing with Hollywood, and Hollywood, they might be losing some leverage, then they're going to go into other organizations and then try to control that. This is what's happening, is the pandemic, some of the SAG-AFTRA talent, they're dealing right now with a lot of labor issues. Let me tell you about what's going on there. So, LA Times put out a story talking about SAG-AFTRA and the Actors Equity are fighting. So, not only do you have the Screen Actors Guild, the AFTRA, AFTRA, this union that is dealing with Hollywood and not be able to go and get proper benefits, employment to their talent because they've gone through a long-standing dispute. First of all, they had those that were dealing with the writer or the Directors Guild. See, the thing is, initially it was the Association of Talent Agents, the agencies that would represent the talent. and how they were being used in like a WWE scenario. Because what happens is, with the Hollywood agencies, the groups like CAA, Creative Artist Agency, or WME, or the biggest talent agencies in the world, they do a thing where they do not individualize talent to go forge projects. They were doing a thing called packaging, which is the same thing what WWE is doing. Well, if you're going to use something from us, you're going to use all of our resources. We'll have the screenwriter, the director, the actors, the actresses, the talent, the grips, all of it. We have them under contract. We'll give them all to you at a good rate to do your project. That's what WWE's been doing, except they're just their own talent agency, and they want to be able to control all avenues of monetization within that group. But yet they don't have them under contract, but they're also independent contractors, so they'll make their money as they do. If somebody is associated with a studio, they make a contract with them, but then they have a contract as an independent contractor working through the agency. And that's what they're doing here. So there's a lot of issues where SAG-AFTRA is trying to go ahead. They're losing some of their membership, and they're trying to fortify it with somebody else. Why not WWE, and why not wrestling in general? They were dealing with a dispute with the Actors Equity Association, known for representing actors who work in live theater productions. So the Broadway types. Now, here's the thing, too, you got to remember. SAG-AFTRA, they actually had a very long history. So if anybody were able to unionize them, this group can. Their relationship with actors and performers, the unionization, traces its history back to the 1930s. Now, moving on here. SAG-AFTRA also followed along and decided to make a statement to further their support after Gabriel Carteris reached out on Twitter. Carteris issued a statement to John Alba of Spectrum Sports about unions in pro wrestling. Quote, "Wrestling is as much about media as it is sports, and we're going to directly engage with members of this profession to help find ways for them to protect themselves. As more people reinvest in unions, and as more working people are harassed by employers who don't want to protect them, SAG-AFTRA is committed to doing what we can to help professional wrestlers secure the protections they deserve." WWE bit off more than they could chew. Now listen, either which way, the company's going to be able to go ahead and do what they need to do. Of course, we know what's going to definitely happen is there's going to be a lot of issues in regards to the mid-card wrestlers, the lower-end wrestlers, getting into a union. Just because they get benefits, they're never going to get pushed. They're never going to get anywhere higher up the food chain. This only hurts the growth creatively for WWE, as a matter of fact. This is a corporate problem. But now, would the company make changes and change the contracts around? But again, this is a lot of money they would have to put into in terms of supporting with benefits and to support with a lot of other things they would have to do. Wrestling.com actually wrote about the story, whether there will be a union coming in the next year or not, with or without SAG-AFTRA. Story comes from Nick Hausman at WrestlingGeek.com. He gathers that there are two main ways where pro wrestlers could go about organizing. The other one, besides going to SAG-AFTRA or creating a union of their own, would be forming their own union, which I think is not the way they should go. Trying to create some kind of a players union or a wrestlers union organization to create some collective bargaining, that will be tough. But again, who's going to go and represent them? And it's not going to be an outside entity, because the SAG-AFTRA wants them to be part of their organization. And since they're sports entertainers, it makes sense for them to do that. And to make some money off the dues. Because remember, guys, the dues that SAG-AFTRA is going to be asking for each year of these stars, plus getting them into insurance plans and other things, because then they're going to be required to pay for insurance. They're going to be required to go and get these pensions. But then the pensions, are they even going to know where that money's going, where it's being invested in? There's a whole lot of questions that have to be asked of the wrestlers. Listen, I understand representation, but what wrestlers shouldn't want is not unionization. They should want restructured contracts. Remove the independent contractor status. Now, if this move is being done in order to do that, that'd probably be better off. So if they're going to do something being related with SAG-AFTRA without having to go through and create their own union, go and establish and get in with the wrestlers here and go in this route. Here's what they're explaining in the story. An existing union like SAG-AFTRA would still need to collect the same number of authorization cards to take on the National Labor Relations Board on behalf of pro wrestlers. Signatures obtained by SAG-AFTRA would likely take first those cards to the company to see if the would be willingly acknowledging the union. If the company said no, then SAG-AFTRA would take those authorization cards, who would then look over the case. If the National Labor Relations Board sees merit in the case of SAG-AFTRA brings, then the wrestlers can vote to have SAG-AFTRA be the representation. If the wrestlers vote yes, then SAG-AFTRA becomes the wrestlers' representatives and take on the ability to do collective bargaining on their behalf. The benefit of that would be working with an existing entity who has experience in the field of negotiating on behalf of entertainers. The wrestlers will then pay dues directly to SAG-AFTRA. So listen, you don't want to create a sports-like scenario. These are sports entertainers. Take the entertainment route. First of all, try to say, listen, as a collective unit, WWE needs to go and come back and offer, listen, we will do some restructuring of contracts to offer benefits as requested. And we will do some things to remove some of what's being on an independent contractor contract. I just think that WWE needs to come in and now offer an olive branch right now. But then if the wrestlers are going to decide to go and unionize, take what SAG-AFTRA is trying to go after. Because that will be better, because also then those stars will not just be relegated to be unions, they're going to be relegated to a union as entertainers. So then they will have SAG-AFTRA cards. They will be able to go ahead and work under union rules. They can go work in Hollywood. That's the benefit you get. And they most likely would do better by offering benefits that you would want in terms of health insurance. Because remember, you want to be in a union that might be larger, that will have more benefits because they're going to have more dues. And hopefully they'll put more into it. But for the most part, SAG-AFTRA is doing what they've been doing, again, for 90 years. They've been the epitome of what's an actors union, entertainers union for a long time. So maybe this is, if they're going to go union, then take Gabriel Carteris's call and see what they say. But as for WWE, I would probably keep an eye on what's being done and start talking to the wrestlers one-on-one of who's being contacted by SAG-AFTRA. Because SAG-AFTRA, we're going to keep an eye on this story and then see if they're going to be doing something more to try to engage more people on board. It's possible. One other story I want to bring up before we're going to wrap things up. So, WWE put out a posting for a lead writer for Raw and SmackDown. So we all would be interested in who would be the kind of person they would want to bring on board. What is their post saying? Well, let's go and talk about it. The listing reads, we're just going to move down to the next paragraph, not the bullshit they number put in. Such a corporate listing. The lead writer will have the opportunity to manage, mentor, and develop experienced writers, producers with a diverse creative background while simultaneously being accountable for compiling, editing, and developing weekly long-term scripts, storylines, and character development. So let's just encrypt that for all of you whippersnappers that are looking to go ahead and be the lead writer. You remember, you're going to be micromanaged by the likes of Vince McMahon, Paul Levesque, the McMahon family, Bruce Pritchard, Kevin Dunn, and others. They go through everything here. Now let's go through requirements. That's more important. 10 years of TV, film writing, and production experience. They should actually have experience. Here's the problem right here. 10 years of TV, film writing, and production experience. What they should, experience supervising a writing team and leading a writer's room. They need a showrunner. An experienced showrunner. That's what they should be looking for. Not just running a writer's room, because that's just micromanaging. That's just being a taskmaster. No, they need to have some autonomy to actually talk about storylines. Storyboarding. But this company's not doing that. For whatever reason. Experience leading multiple team members and pitching to creative networks and executives. Okay. Professional TV staff experience in drama and comedy, a plus. Why not? Writing and directing reality TV, a plus. Okay. Comedy, drama, live TV, got it. Strong knowledge of WWE shows, talent, storylines, and audience demographic, psychographic. And then having a bachelor's in film, TV, drama, media studies, communications, or similar field or study, or proven experience in lieu of degree. So it still comes down to, I'm not sure. I just don't like where they're going with this idea. Again, even the posts that they have, there's no screenwriting experience, no, nothing to talk about storyboards, nothing to talk about show running. You need an executive producer. Lead writer doesn't say too much. This person should have executive production credit. And there should be a say into what happens, because there's nothing being said that you're going to be putting together content which will be filtered very extensively by the staff. And remember that there might be a lot of things that you'll try to put out there that will not go through. Either which way, I don't like it. I could go ahead and nitpick this all I want, but again, if this is where we're going with finding a lead writer, it's not working. You're running the writing room, and you're not even looking for somebody that can actually knows how to produce content. We don't want just writers to come up with ideas that will get shot down. No, the lead writer should actually have something where they actually could go ahead and craft storylines, storyboard it, give us beginning, end, and a middle, with oversight by the management team. But no, they're going to continue to use the wrestling bubble. That's what they're going to do. Anyways, we're going to leave it there. Survivor Series is this weekend. Didn't even think about that. It's kind of a blip on the radar for me. But I might as well go ahead and talk about it. We will do a post show for that this weekend. So we'll start off with Drew McIntyre, who is now the new WWE champion, and a very good match, by the way, they had on Raw, which was really good. I can appreciate that. The show did go up, by the way, 1.778 million viewers, so that's a little bit better. But again, they had a title match the other night, which is more important than anything else. But the title match the other night only got 1.5 million, excuse me, 1.78 million viewers. And it was 1.868 to start off, 1.74 for hour two. There you go. Now, here's what we got for matches. Universal Champion versus the WWE Champion. Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns will win. U.S. Champion versus the IC Champion. Bobby Lashley versus Sami Zayn. Bobby Lashley will win. New Day versus Street Profits. Raw versus SmackDown Tag Team Titles. Tag Team Champions, excuse me. Street Profits will probably win here. Asuka versus Sasha Banks. We've actually seen this match, so I think Sasha Banks will take the win. Raw versus SmackDown Men's Survivor Series Elimination Match. AJ Styles, Keith Lee, Sheamus, Braun Strowman, and Riddle versus Kevin Owens, Jey Uso, King Corbin, Seth Rollins, and one more to be announced. And I'll give that to the Raw team to win, which will cause a bit of rift between Jey Uso and Roman Reigns. We can just see that happen. Raw vs. SmackDown, the Women's Survivor Series Elimination Match. Shayna Baszler, Nia Jax, Lacey Evans, Peyton Royce, and Lana versus Bianca Belair, Ruby Riott, Liv Morgan, and 2 more to be announced. My guess is the SmackDown team will win. Bayley will probably and somebody else will know. But that's where I go with things right now. So that's coming up this weekend. We'll talk about it a little bit on a post show very shortly this Sunday right here at WrestlingIsReal.com. So until then, enjoy Survivor Series. We'll come back and let me know what you thought about a discussion tonight about all the labor union stuff and the independent contractors, and if SAG-AFTRA decides to go and try to help the WWE superstars unionize. It's an interesting story. We can keep an eye on it. Come back for another Wrestling is Real podcast this weekend because wrestling needs us. Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast, brought to you by KingofAmazon.com. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and on Facebook at Wrestling is Real. Subscribe to the Wrestling is Real podcast through all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio. You can also look for episodes on his YouTube channel, youtube.com/JBRASCO951. You can find all this information and more by going to the website, WrestlingIsReal.com.